All right, let's just jump right in. Have you ever stopped to think about where our ideas come from? I mean, really think about it. Take something like sexuality, or madness, or even what it means to be a criminal. We tend to think these things are just, well, natural, right? Fixed truths about the world. But what if they're not? What if they were invented? That's the huge, kind of mind-blowing idea we're going to tackle today, and it all comes from one thinker, Michel Foucault.
Hello everyone, this is Professor Husseini. For those of you in my social theory course, welcome to our guide for the Week 5 reading on Foucault. Now, I know Foucault can seem a little dense. I get it. His writing is complex, but the ideas inside, they're absolutely game-changing tools for understanding the world we live in. So what we're going to do here is break down some of his key concepts. I want you to think of this as a primer, a way to get your footing before you tackle the reading itself. It is absolutely not a replacement for the text, but it's here to help you engage with it on a deeper level. And hopefully, it'll get you fired up to bring your thoughts to our class discussions and the online Padlet. Okay, so here's the plan. We'll kick things off by digging into Foucault's big idea, challenging the natural. Then we'll look at how society disciplines our bodies and how the very idea of sexuality was, well, invented. After that, we'll connect it all to his theories on power, truth, and discourse. We'll see his legacy in queer theory, and then, at the end, it's going to be your turn to do some questioning.
All right, Section 1. Challenging the natural. So, first things first, who was this guy, Michel Foucault? Well, you could say he was a French philosopher who basically took a sledgehammer to everything we take for granted. He wasn't on a quest for some kind of eternal, timeless truth. Nope, he was all about history. But not the history you're probably used to, you know, the one with kings and queens and big battles. Foucault wrote a history of thought itself. He was obsessed with one question. How did we end up thinking about things like medicine, or crime and punishment, or even desire in the very specific way we do today? In this quote right here, this really gets to the absolute core of his whole project. Foucault's big argument was that all these categories that society tells us are natural, that they're just the way things are almost always man-made. They're social constructions. You know, they were built at a certain moment in history for very specific reasons. And you guessed it, those reasons often have a lot to do with power and control.
Okay, so let's move on. Section 2, disciplining the body. This is where that whole idea of social construction gets really, really tangible. Because Foucault shows us how society controls not just our ideas, but our actual physical bodies. He was absolutely fascinated by the way institutions, think about prisons, schools, hospitals, even the military, shape and control how we behave.
And that brings us to this key concept, docile bodies. See, for Foucault, modern power isn't just about a king threatening to chop off your head. That's old school. Modern power is way more subtle. It works by getting us to discipline ourselves. Think about it. From the second you walk into kindergarten, you're trained to control your body, right? Sit still. Stand in a straight line. Raise your hand. All this training, over years and years, creates bodies that are predictable, useful, and easy to manage. In a word, docile.
And you know, this whole process goes way beyond the classroom or the factory floor. Just look at the ads you see every single day. The media constantly bombards us with this image of the perfect, idealized body. You know the one. It's fit, it's toned, not a flaw in sight. And what does that do? It encourages us to start our own little disciplinary practices, doesn't it? We go on diets, we hit the gym, we're constantly monitoring ourselves. We actually volunteer to put our own bodies through this regime, all in the hope of getting a little bit closer to that impossible ideal. So how does this self-discipline really work? Well, Foucault came up with this brilliant and kind of creepy metaphor to explain it, the panopticon. Now, this was an actual architectural design for a prison from back in the 18th century. Picture this. You've got a ring of prison cells, all facing inwards towards a central watchtower. The guard in that tower can look into any cell at any time. But here's the kicker. The inmates can't see into the tower. They never know if the guard is looking at them.
So the whole genius, or, the horror of the design, is the unverifiable surveillance. Because you never know for sure if you're being watched right this second. What do? You have to act as if you're always being watched. The power isn't a guard with the club anymore. It's inside your own head. The inmate becomes his own guard. And Foucault's big leap was to say, hey, this isn't just about prisons anymore. With all the CCTV cameras, GPS in our phones, and the digital trail we leave everywhere online, aren't we all kind of living in a giant electronic panopticon? We're constantly aware we could be monitored, and that awareness quietly, subtly shapes everything we do. All right, let's pivot. Section 3, the invention of sexuality.
Now, Foucault takes this same historical microscope and points it at something we think of as the most personal, most private thing there is, sex. And his argument is just as radical. He says that our modern idea of sexuality, as this core piece of our identity, this thing about ourselves that can be studied and labeled and managed, is actually a pretty new idea. It was invented.
So what was driving this? Well, Foucault calls it biopower. Here's the deal. Starting a few centuries ago, states and governments figured out that if they wanted to be strong and wealthy, they couldn't just manage territory. They had to manage the population itself. They had to manage life. And if you're going to manage a population, what are the key variables? Well, it's birth rates, death rates, public health, fertility. And at the center of all of that is, of course, sex. Suddenly, what people did in the privacy of their own homes became a massive public, political, and even economic issue that needed to be managed.
And you want to see biopower in action? Look no further than the census. The state isn't just doing a simple head count. It's asking about our most intimate lives. It's putting us into boxes. Married? Divorced? Living with the same-sex partner? All of a sudden, our relationships, our households, they're turned into data points. They become objects for administrators to analyze, to govern, and to control.
Now, to drive home just how arbitrary all these categories we create really are, Foucault absolutely loved this example. It's supposedly from an ancient Chinese encyclopedia, and it divides animals into categories like belonging to the emperor, or, my favorite, that from a long way off look like flies. And we read that and we laugh, right? It sounds completely bonkers, totally nonsensical. But that's exactly Foucault's point. He wants us to feel that same sense of shock and strangeness when we look at our own classification systems. The only reason our categories feel natural and logical is because we grew up inside the system of thought that invented them.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit. Section 4, power, truth, and discourse. We've seen all this categorization and control, but how does it actually work? What's the engine driving it? For Foucault, the whole machine runs on 3 interconnected gears: power, truth, and what he calls discourse.
Let's start with a big one, the confession. Foucault had this idea that our whole society has become a confessing society. It started way back with religious confession, to a priest, but he says that technique is now everywhere. We confess our symptoms to doctors, our anxieties to therapists, our secrets on reality TV shows, even in our own journals. In all these rituals, we're basically pushed to speak the truth about ourselves, especially about our deepest desires. But here's the twist. Foucault says this truth doesn't just set you free, it's produced inside a power dynamic where someone else, the doctor, the therapist, the audience, has the authority to listen, to interpret, and in the end, to define who you are based on what you said.
This leads to another huge idea: the regime of truth. For Foucault, truth isn't some pure, objective thing just floating out there, waiting for us to discover it. Nope. He says truth is produced. Every society has its own regime of truth, which is basically the set of unwritten rules about what's considered true and what's considered false. It's the rules about who gets to be an expert, who we listen to, and what kind of language or procedures you have to use to have your statements taken seriously. So, from this perspective, truth and power are never separate. They're always tangled up together.
And this brings us to maybe his most famous, most radical idea of all, his theory of power. We tend to think of power as a thing, right? Like a crown that a king wears, or a weapon someone holds, something you either have or you don't. Foucault says, scrap that. Power isn't a thing, it's a relationship. It's not top-down. It's more like a web or a network that circulates through all of society. And it doesn't just repress us and say, no, you can't do that. It's also productive. It produces things. It produces knowledge. It produces categories. It produces the very truths we confess about ourselves. Power is everywhere, and we are all part of this web, constantly being acted upon by power, but also exercising it ourselves in small ways.
Okay, Section 5, the queering of theory. So, as you can imagine, these ideas about power and how all our categories are basically just made up, well, they had a huge impact, and they really paved the way for a major field of thought that came after him: queer theory. In fact, Foucault's argument that the whole concept of sexuality was a historical invention became one of the founding texts for this whole new way of thinking about identity.
His work really threw fuel on the fire of this huge debate between essentialism and constructionism. Let me break it down. The essentialist view is the idea that sexuality is basically biological. It's a natural fact, a core part of who you are. The slogan "Born This Way" is pure essentialism. But the constructionist view, which Foucault championed, says, hold on a minute. Maybe desires are real, but the identity of being a gay person or a straight person, those are social labels, they're historical creations. The whole project of dividing the entire human population into these two camps, homosexual and heterosexual, is a product of a very specific moment in history.
And let's be clear, this isn't just some abstract academic debate. These ideas have had massive, real-world consequences. By denaturalizing sexuality, by showing that heterosexuality wasn't this timeless, default normal, this way of thinking blew the doors open politically. It created the space to argue for the legitimacy of all kinds of other sexualities. It was a really crucial intellectual building block for the LGBTQ+ rights movement and the fight for things like marriage equality.
And then, queer theory comes along and takes Foucault's challenge to the next level. See, it's not just about saying, okay, homosexuality is valid, just like heterosexuality. It's way more rebellious than that. It's an attempt to blow up the whole binary system itself. Queer theorists argue that these rigid boxes, gay, straight, bi, just don't do justice to the incredible fluidity and complexity of actual human desire and identity. The whole point is to queer things, to destabilize all the fixed categories and embrace the messy reality instead of trying to fit everyone into neat little boxes for the census takers. Okay, deep breath. After that whirlwind tour, we're at our final section, your turn to question. Because really, that's what Foucault's entire project is about. It's about questioning. He's not just giving us answers, he's giving us a powerful set of tools to look at our own world with fresh, critical eyes. A way to see the hidden histories and the webs of power lurking behind all the stuff we just think of as normal.
So, let's quickly recap the main takeaways. First, always be suspicious of the natural. It's usually a social construction. Second, remember that institutions are always working to discipline our bodies, often through surveillance that makes us discipline ourselves. Third, power isn't a thing someone holds. It's a network that circulates everywhere and produces things, including, fourth, truth. Truth is produced by a society's regime of truth. And finally, all this thinking opened the door for things like queer theory to challenge the very idea of fixed identities. Got it? Good.
So now it's over to you. I want you to take this idea of a regime of truth, a system that decides what counts as true or valid knowledge, and I want you to look for it in your own world. Where do you see it operating? On campus? How are academic standards a regime of truth? What about in your social media feed, where algorithms literally decide what truth you see? Or what about the unwritten rules in your friend group about what's okay to say and what's not? Think about it, because once you start looking through this Foucauldian lens, you'll start seeing these power structures everywhere. I really want you to bring these thoughts to our class and especially post them on our online Padlet. I can't wait to see what you come up with.